Hello, everybody. Welcome to the value versus impact session, looking at how different methodologies compare. We've got four amazing speakers in the room. I'm going to introduce the session and then turn to each of them in turn to comment on a different aspect of social value versus social impact, to really unpick the different methodologies and different uses. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves when we come to them, if that's all right. I think all the bios are in the in the packs anyway, so I don't want to waste valuable question answer time to spend on people's histories, but we've got a great variety of experience in the room. What we're trying to do really is not to have a session where we're looking at and listing out all the different methodologies, but to unpick that a little bit, to really ask the question about what are the differences in usage? How do we use it to better measure and understand and report, and crucially improve the value that different approaches take? Are some methodologies better suited to certain types of organizations? And do they both have a place in the conversation? And interestingly, I think certainly from our experience, um, there are lots of different methodologies that have a place, and it depends on that balance that you want to create between quantitative data and stakeholder storytelling. And I think the most valuable methodologies bring both together, and most do. So I think that that's certainly a place I'd like to start and to explore. My name is Charlotte Turner. I run an organization called Bean Research. We're an evaluation agency, and we come at it from both sides of social value, both in working with organizations who have to commit to and report on, often with procurement as a driver, on their social value. But as a valuation organization, we're also looking at social return on investment and CBA and other methodologies for really understanding social value. I also, for my sins, teach at Cranfield Business School or School of Management on social value. That certainly is part of the academic master's course. 10 years ago, social value was sort of one of the last things that was ticked off. Nothing to do with me, but it's absolutely front and center now. We can't escape the fact that it's being talked about more and more. And in the global context of change, we're certainly seeing that more and more people are needing to really evidence the value and the impact of what they're doing, to be able to tell the story and to learn from it. So I hope this will be a valuable session. Please put in your questions, and I'll do my best to go around the room. I think we're going to focus on each of the speakers in turn. So if I may, can I start with you, Carrie-Ann? You've had a number of roles in the space and now advise different organizations. So how can organizations and those in the room really kind of navigate the menu of social value measurement methodologies? An alphabet soup I've heard described, and what is the most appropriate way to choose the right approach for their context? How would you go about that?
Thank you, Charlotte. Hi to everybody. Nice to be here to be able to chat to you on a very rainy afternoon in Lancashire, where I am at the moment. Yes, I have been meddling with social value for quite a long time, 18 years, ouch, in terms of how long I've been involved. And that means I've heard a lot of things, seen a lot of things, and learned a lot of things in terms of what social value looks and feels like. And yes, we are at a point with our maturity in this field where there are a lot of things available to us when we're thinking about social value impact. And the key to knowing what you need to use, which system to look at, which approach to choose, is what is it I'm trying to do here? We have work winning, we have quality assurance, we have processes and procedures we need in our organisation to oversee what we need to do with social impact. Sometimes we need to monetize what we're doing. Sometimes we need to win awards or report or look at how we need to demonstrate we're a responsible business. And that menu of things is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more things that you might want to do, but actually thinking, what is it we want the outcome of adopting a new way of working to be? And what is that outcome? And it's okay for that to be, we need to win this tender. And so we need to understand how to use the social value portal and the TOMs more efficiently in a procurement environment. It's okay to think we need to demonstrate we're a responsible business by looking at B Corp and accreditations like that might not pivot your organisation into some magical social impact kind of environment, but it will give you a structure and a framework and things to think about and prompts, and it will show you as well what you don't want to do. So when you look at social return on investment as a methodology, when you look at TOMs as a framework, when you look at B Corp as a certification, there's going to be things in there that feel right, and there's going to be things in there that don't feel comfortable. So it'll show you where your gaps are. It'll show you where you don't want to focus. And yes, navigating this is difficult. You can listen to webinars, you can look online, you can have marketing collateral from different companies. But what I would say is if you search how many people on LinkedIn are doing social value as a role, there are a lot of us now, and that is wonderful. So if you want to know what to do about a certain problem, like the things I've just mentioned, just ask us. Just ask us on LinkedIn what to do, and you'll get hundreds of responses. You can do it publicly, you can DM us, but there are lots of experts who love to talk about social value, love to share, and love to help. So I think just ask and think about what it is we're trying to achieve before you start to choose to pay for a tool or a methodology.
That's really helpful, and being really clear on intention.
Yes.
It is absolutely certainly from our experience. I've just spent the day with lots of different development banks, really thinking about and their language was they all came into the room with concern about social value, but realised that if you framed it in what is the social outcome or the social intention, you end up with something very different. That's really useful to hear. Thank you, Carrie-Ann. Nathan, can I turn to you now? How can different social value methodologies work together in your experience to provide that collective understanding or comprehensive understanding of an organization's impact? What are your top tips for how an organization might better understand their overall social footprint? Carrie-Ann talked about lots of social value workforce now, and people are coming at it from different angles, whether you're measuring a contract, a commitment, a social intervention. How would you go about the collective, an organization's total social footprint?
Well, that's a big question. Thank you very much, Charlotte. So first of all, I'm Nathan Goode, Chief Knowledge Officer at Social Value Portal. So I'm kind of implicated with the TOMs. I've spent 10 or 11 years of my life with the TOMs, and nowadays I look after how it gets developed, how it gets implemented, and also how we think about social value beyond the TOMs as well. So to your point, Charlotte, I think first of all we need to start by recognizing the limitations of what we do as social value practitioners. A social value or social impact framework is, when all is said and done, just a model, but that's fine. I was looking for quotes about models, and I found one from John Maynard Keynes, who said that it's better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. I kind of keep that in mind when I'm thinking about the way in which we try and evolve our approach to social value. I would say that no model of social value is a single source of truth. There are assumptions and trade-offs, whatever the methodology. We need models. They give us structure, they allow us to rationalize the world, but they're not the world, which is complex and messy. So, and obviously nowhere is that probably more true than in the field of social value and social impact. So different methodologies give you different perspectives, and it follows then that actually bringing them together is likely to give you a richer and more nuanced picture. But the flip side, and I'm sure Carrie-Ann and others feel the pain of this, is that the overlaps between methodologies can be messy and difficult to resolve and obscure, and lots of challenges really trying to figure out whether you're comparing like with like. And for organizations reporting and delivering social value, this this complexity takes up precious time and resources, and we're not all social value experts, and nor should we be. This should be something that non-experts can pick up and use and apply. They're the ones, after all, delivering the social value, not us. So how do we square off these challenges? How do we get the best from these different approaches to social value without making life impossibly complicated for the people who are actually trying to get stuff done? I think the answer lies in setting standards for the foundations of social values. There are kind of common value blocks, if you like, common foundations that any social value approach, any social value methodology has to use. And really, I'm talking about the data that is collected when these methodologies are put into practice, but also the data that feeds into the development of the methodologies themselves. And that extends to what you were talking about, Charlotte, in terms of storytelling as well, which is a really important part of that data. And then I think it's about being transparent about how that data is being analysed and validated. So I don't think it's about trying to force different methodologies into some kind of awkward alignment, if you like, but we should be looking at those building blocks and asking ourselves questions about how we make those more aligned, and we have standards of data reporting, for example, that are consistent and applied across the board.
So those standards are crucial. So building in different methodologies, the like for like, as you rightly say, is a challenge. But if there's an understanding of the principles and the approach,
yeah,
they can come together.
So where is the information coming from? How have you used the information? What adjustments, what changes have you made to it along the way? Leaving aside your principles of social value, actually, it's if you get the data kind of aligned and comparable, then actually that gives you a really strong base to look at social value through different lenses.
Brilliant. Please keep your questions coming. We're seeing some fantastic questions. We'll come to them in a sec, and please do keep them coming. You talked there about storytelling, and Holly, you're in a business developing its social value approach. You have talked, I've heard you talk before about engaging internal audiences. How do different approaches work for you in that context, in telling the story of the social value you create?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this question. I actually think as social value professionals, whether you're in a business or not, often it gets overlooked with the amount of different stakeholders that we actually have to engage with. So ultimately, as a social value professional, you may be speaking with investors to senior leadership teams and the commercial teams, all the way through to your delivery teams that may be working in construction, they may be consultants in digital in my case. So actually the different methodologies we use and how we talk to people is really important in terms of social value. So what do I actually mean by this is when I'm talking to the commercial team within the organisation at Hippo, where I am at the moment, I will use SMART targets, and they are interested in that and the KPIs that we need to meet as a business, whether that is for public sector procurement, and obviously the 002 in procurement is now asking for that KPI, which is really important for us to win that work. And that is a driver for social value, or one of them at the moment. If I look at the other end, when that moves through, actually the delivery teams aren't particularly interested in what KPIs we need to meet as a business. If I tell them they need to bring on a T-level student, they're going to see that as additional work and resource that they don't have alongside their day jobs ultimately. So actually, I use much more of a storytelling and qualitative approach. So if you take on that T-level student, it's not going to hit a KPI, but actually that's going to help support someone who's got a barrier to employment. That person is then going to have income for that period of time. Then we can move them on to sustained employment. And actually that's going to change their career trajectory for the rest of their life, which is something charitable organizations are very good at. But how do we actually bring that up into a business perspective? And that's where I think those quantitative KPIs are really important. When I'm talking about quantitative, I just want to specify that I'm talking about SMART targets. There is a place for evaluating that and attributing a pounds figure to it as well. But I see that as a risk, and that's why I want to focus on the KPIs, because I think, as Nathan touched on as well, there isn't any set standard for that measurement piece at the moment. So actually, if I say I taken on a T level, I've got that hard and fast figure. But I talk about those methodologies in different ways depending who I'm talking to in the business.
And some of the questions already are asking to distinguish between social value and social impact, just from an internal audience perspective.
Yeah.
How do you use that language?
I think it's really interesting, and it's something I've only recently started talking about the difference. When I'm talking about impact, that's the impacts that we're having, and that's that storytelling piece. That's me personally, that's not a set standard. But when I'm talking about social value, that's the valuation of what we're doing. So that's attributing that pound figure.
Yes.
That's how I talk about it within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. And we're already talking about lots of different methodologies. I think the Institute of Social Value, it brings an independent voice to aiming to create clarity in social value measurement. Can I turn to you, Isabelle? What, in your view, should organisations consider when they're choosing different methodologies to ensure both integrity and meaningful measurement, but also a real understanding of social value creation and impact?
Great to be here and lovely to be speaking in front of this very large audience. Really proud to be this. I think this is the last conference slot that I'm speaking at before I step down as the CEO of the Institute. So it's a very bittersweet moment for me. So in terms of organisations that come to us, so obviously as the independent organisation within the sector, we get a lot of organisations that come to us and say, look, we've got this very complicated spreadsheet that we have created, and we've put down all of the approaches that we think might fit us. And then we've created several columns that will compare what they do and what their benefits and features are. And we've had meetings with each one of them. And this has taken us 6 months and we're still none the wiser, Isabelle. And that's often what we're confronted with, a state of confusion and not really knowing where to turn next. And as lots of the people have said already who have spoken, people will often be motivated by the driver of winning a contract. So that's when people tend to come to us at that particular pain point. And what we say to them is it's really important to treat the project or the organization as an individual project, as a unique organization. So there is no one best methodology. Obviously, the roots of the Institute for Social Value sprung up through social return on investment, which is, I think, often viewed as the gold standard in terms of measurement. However, it's not applicable to every scenario. And thankfully, there are many different approaches that will be able to meet different needs. So with organizations, we tend to say to them, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are your goals? They will often really be focused very much on winning the contract. Some will be approaching us to talk about the brilliant social value that they've been creating, sometimes for hundreds of years, and they want to be able to talk about that. Others will approach us to say that they want to be able to tell their story. So they might be using what they've done for marketing, might be for gaining a bid, or it might be because they want to improve their reputation and be able to speak about all that they're doing. So those are the 3 main categories, but it depends on the individual purpose. And then we move on to the idea of, okay, you know, with, for example, a project where we're looking at, let's say, urban regeneration. So I've just spoken at UCL to the master's students there, and what they might be focusing much more on is the involvement with stakeholders and hearing about impacts on communities and what difference it will make, this project, what will it be doing in 10 years' time. So they're looking much more at legacy. Whereas an organisation that is, let's say, going for a large public sector contract may need a methodology that will be much more standardised. It might focus much more on numbers, etc. So as we've all agreed, there are many different approaches. It's not a one size fits all. It's all about what's unique. What I hope that the Institute will bring to that discussion is the very key underpinning, which are the 8 principles of social value. And those ensure that whatever methodology is used, the involvement with stakeholders is at the centre. And that may vary according to the approach. So it might be that there's a lot of involvement, there might be less, but there needs to be a way of the organisation figuring out whether that approach really does involve stakeholders and then them making the choice as to whether they want to go with one or another. And there are other principles that are very important. I won't go through all of them, but transparency is one, being clear about what it is that you're measuring, what are you leaving out, what are you going to overlook, and ensuring that you're not really overclaiming. So all of us have read reports where, you know, the statement is that wonderful things have happened and, you know, you've created 10 million pounds worth of social value. But the other side of the story where social value has been destroyed, that is not talked about. And so what we look at is always the net impact, and we encourage organisations to do that, go that extra mile and not just talk about what's being created, but talk about what's been destroyed and what they're going to do about that. So that's a very snapshot version of the answer that we give to organisations that come to us.
Thank you. I think that net impact is so important, and the contribution that you're making as well is often missed off, isn't it? In valuing social value, and social impact is your contribution to that value creation. I think it's quite interesting. We've got brilliant questions. We've got a couple on double counting. I think the most recent one was, how might we connect monetize social value metrics with evidence-based impact outcomes without double counting? Which I think is an interesting question. I'd like to throw it over to you. I might come to you, Carrie-Ann, if that's all right on to start with that one. I think from my perspective on that, we talk about breadth of impact, depth of impact, causality of impact, and then value of impact. And if you go through that process, then the value element is adding to those evidence-based impact outcomes rather than being a different methodology. But Carrie-Ann, do you want to take that one, or anyone else?
Yeah, happy to. So the key, I think, to this is you've got to embrace your inner social value geek.
Love it.
And the reason for that is you've got to get your head around what the monetized tools are based on. So there are different types of monetization. I'm not going to get my geek on ethically at the moment. I'm going to do this quickly, but they're based on different things.
Yes.
Some are economic and fiscal, which is about people paying tax and NI when they get jobs and things, and also better, happier people using less public services, blue light services and things like that. So there's a churn of money savings moving around, which give us that economic and fiscal type impact. So if you are looking at a well-being evidence-based supplement to that, that is about how did that person feel, what were the benefits and disbenefits to them of a particular intervention, those two things can sit very happily together, because one is about this churn of fiscal stuff that's boring and happens in the background to us all, and the other is about asking those beneficiaries, what was your lived experience, and understanding that well-being impact. Similarly, if it's to do with quality of life, kind of improvements through a well-being type measurement, then you can try to find that balance between that more monetized churn of stuff and the more human-centered question survey-based real life version of events that happened, but you've got to do a little bit of digging and a little bit of research to get your head around that. And again, if you don't want to and you don't get it, just ask somebody who does social value and they'll help you.
Very good advice. We've got quite a few questions about particular frameworks. One in particular, I think it was the first question we had, was asking about the Wellbeing Future Generations framework in Wales. Has any of the panelists got any experience of using the Future Generations Act framework that they'd like to comment on?
Yeah, just to jump in on that. I mean, we Social Value Portal has been working with Welsh Government over a number of months to refresh the TOM system for Wales, and in so doing, consider the 4 pillars and the Future Generations model. And I think it's kind of to this session. I think it's really about recognizing that a bit like the UN Sustainable Development Goals and other mechanisms for classifying, if you like, social value outcomes in different ways. It's a front end that you can feed, in essence, with different approaches to social valuation, if you like. So doing it with the TOMS is one way. There will, I'm sure, there'll be other approaches as well. I think the challenge and the opportunity for Welsh Government is to encourage a diversity of approach, so that it can look at its future generations goals in multiple dimensions, and look at well-being, look at impact, and so on. I think what's great about the Welsh approach is to start with the principle of future generations, and we've got a session tomorrow morning, which is combining Australia and Wales to talk about future generations. And what I think is a good challenge for all of us is to think beyond the present, and think genuinely about impact and how the ripple effect of impact goes over not just one person's life, but more than one generation.
One of the things I find really valuable about these sort of frameworks is that they allow a different view and a more nuanced view of the individual locations. There's another question about the regional basis.
Yeah.
I think that's again a really interesting way, if you're contextualizing the impact that you want to have in a region, it's going to be a lot truer. And one thing I particularly like about the Wales one is the talk about resilience. A lot of social value metrics, and particularly if you're talking about monetized social value, focuses on employment and jobs, whereas in a VCSE context, and you're talking about sustained employment as a social outcome, it is often the journey to that sustained employment that is just as important. And resilience, locus of control, those sorts of outcomes, we find certainly are just as valuable to be able to measure along the journey as that endpoint. So I think using these different frameworks to help you really articulate the outcomes that you have, I think is really useful. Is there anyone else who'd like to add on that regional point? I think there was a specific question on.
I'd love to comment on the original question in terms of the Welsh approach. So some of the feedback that we get is that there are challenges and bumps along the road in terms of implementation being consistent, etc. And you would expect that similar to other areas as well. But I think the good thing about it is the focus on the future. And that's where I took a lot at the Institute about legacy. It's so very important. And one of the things that was really interesting in speaking at UCL, I was speaking on the urban regeneration program. And one of the things that they brought up was that, I mean, these were not experts in social value by any means, but they were talking about the idea that often an area would be regenerated, but there's not a lot of thought to the people who were the original people living there. So an organization will move in to an area, and there will be people living in that area, working in that area, and then there will be the project that will be undertaken and the area will be regenerated. But the people who were there in the original period of time, they are kind of left behind as a result of all of this great social value that is theoretically created, and then they're priced out of that particular area. And so what we see missing sometimes is that concept of what's going to happen in 20 years' time after the project is over, what will happen in 30 years' time, and to all of those people along the timeline, how are they impacted? And so that's why I love the talk about future generations, but also the idea of resilience and the idea of legacy. It's so absolutely crucial to this whole discussion.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had a number of questions asking about, from the perspective of VCSEs particularly, but the cost of frameworks, the cost of social value measurement and impact assessment, and where it feels prohibitive or challenging for organisations. Does anyone want to address that from the panel?
I don't mind starting with that one.
Thanks.
I understand that completely. And working as a business, so I think firstly, I did have a look at that comment, and someone's commented there are some free tools that are available to use. So Tom's have some free ones that I know is available to use, and then also someone else said about Measure Up as well, which is a good option. But I think separately to that is, as a VCSE, you're delivering that impact on the ground, and obviously that's the most beneficial things, you're actually delivering it. Why are you looking to monetize it? And if it's from a business perspective, if it is for that business, for them to be able to report, they would actually usually have their own tools as well. So at Hippo Digital, a lot of the time we might work with a VCSE organization. They will collect the data that we need, but then we will use that and put that into a tool that we have the capital as a business to invest in. So
that's a really useful point. Use frameworks and approaches that others have. But I also think that sometimes we make it too complex. I mean, we work mostly with VCSEs, some of which are also needing to prove their social value from a commissioning point of view as well. Quite interestingly, in that interface, I think that you don't necessarily need to adopt some of the off-the-shelf frameworks. Would be my advice on that. I don't know what other panelists think, but certainly. Get it really simple. What does success look like? And how are you going to assess progress against that? And the answer may be monetize social value. It might not be. And I think that would be but it's always therefore in my mind about really understanding the impact you have and asking the question about how do we create value and how can we increase the extent to which we do create value. And if that's the starting, and if you put that in the context of your own what's individual about you as a VCSE in your location using the regional or national frameworks that you have, you'll get to the answer pretty quickly. And as Nathan rightly said, it may not be a monetized or quantitative, it may be through the storytelling aspect, or it may be through just really being clear on 3 or 4 key metrics that you want to measure consistently across the organization. Anyone else anything to add on VCSEs?
Maybe if I could just come in quickly as you name check me there. Well, one of the things that we're very conscious of, and we've had a lot of feedback at SVP about over the years, and we're trying to sort of address is VCSEs do find themselves in competitive tendering situations where they have to use whatever's put in front of them as a social value framework, and understandably that can be can create some challenges, and it may be because it's burdensome, as you say, may also be because it actually kind of misses the point about what the VCSE is there to do and there to deliver. And I think there are kind of ways in which we can be more intentional and more targeted about how social value gets embedded in procurement. And I know there are public bodies, local authorities, for example, who are thinking very actively about this. And it's a really important issue because there are large swathes of tendering that are, or rather contracts that are tendered that are best suited to VCSEs. So there's more work to do here, definitely, I think, and we should be working together to make it work more smoothly and be more relevant to what the VCSEs are there for.
And it's become more relevant, hasn't it, since it's been evolved into the health and justice areas. There's a lot of
absolutely, yeah,
legally defined charities delivering on that public sector focus. Yes,
Charlotte, I wondered if I could just jump in. I just wanted to be very pragmatic because I do see that there are quite a few questions related to this, so it seems to be quite a concern. And very recently, we ran a session on VCSEs and SMEs within the procurement sector, and that was led by Jacob Hill, one of our board members. So please do go and have a look at that. And we were also running a consultation on this very thing. So watch out for what we're going to bring up on it. But on a practical level, for those organizations that are looking for free access to tools, etc., literally, if you type into Google your question, you will get a number of tools and approaches that will assist you. I won't name any here because we try to be independent, but it will come up very, very quickly. So that will help you. The other thing is that there are practitioners who are willing to help at reduced rate to support VCSEs and SMEs. So I do know that they are on the market, having had discussions very recently with some who do support charities and do pro bono work, etc. So that is an option. And then the third thing is that there are many organisations that, and of course it does depend on why the VCSE is looking for this help, but there are many organisations that are now putting investment into supporting VCSEs and SMEs by offering workshops and training courses way before bids go in so that they can support those within the supply chain to be able to manage social value in-house and gain some of the tools and perhaps even provide their expertise and resources. So those are just 3 practical tips that I hope are really helpful.
Very helpful, thank you. I just want to go on to one last set of questions here. There's quite a few questions about the metrics used and how you really are able to demonstrate value and impact. Let me just pick on one of the questions that is from Lauren, I think here. As a supplier seeking to measure on social value commitments we can do well, what's your advice on demonstrating value and impact to commissioners who are very rigid and seeking commitments on a very small set of metrics at a bid stage and beyond? How do you demonstrate that collective organisational footprint that we were talking about, Nathan and Holly particularly? How do you demonstrate those wide value and impact to commissioners when they are looking for very specific rigid metrics? Holly, Nathan, can I ask one of you to pick up on that? Sorry, it's a bit mean.
I have a little smidge on that as well when Holly and
Carrie-Ann, brilliant.
Carrie-Ann, do you want to go first?
You go first.
I can do. Take the pressure off if you want. So I think there is always going to be a barrier to being able to showcase what you want when a procurement exercise is very rigid. But there are little things that you can do when you're submitting your offer to try and get a client to understand a little bit more nuance. So people often see social value offers as a list because they're in a list, because they're in an Excel spreadsheet or something similar. And all social value is not equal. And you need to find a way to frame your social value. Anybody that's ever spoken to me ever or worked with me before will know I talk about a social value triangle. And a social value triangle with 3 layers in it looks like this. On the bottom of the triangle is your core social value. It's the stuff you do, it's your business as usual type things that is still very, very important, but it's the foundation of what you deliver. The middle bit of the triangle, slightly smaller, is your added value. That's where you make that core better somehow. You do more of it, you make it more inclusive, but you add a nuance to it. That takes more effort and energy from you, and you need to get that recognized. Top of the triangle is innovation. that's where you're going to have to spend some money and some time to do something that is more legacy leaving. So the key to getting your clients to pay more attention to what you're trying to say within a rigid framework is to try and explain that in your methodology, in a diagram on a title page of a tender that's not even being scored. Sneaky, like get it in there, get them to see that you have a nuance to what you're doing, and show them the different levels of resource and effort and impact that is coming from your offer. And it's not just one generic list. It's not all equal, and it won't do all the same things.
Brilliant advice. Thank you, Carrie-Ann. Anyone else like to come in on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's boring, but there are, there are very strict rules around procurement, and I think what Carrie-Ann said was great. The sort of the tactical approach, really, when you find yourself in that situation. The other thing to do is to influence the questions that get asked in the first place, and clearly you can't do that in the tender. You have to be you have to be engaged way before that tender actually gets formulated and framed. So that speaks to the way in which you build relationships with procuring authorities and your presence in those locations if your activity is place-based, and that's obviously not always going to be true. So I think one of the things that we get this kind of question coming up a lot. The problem is there's an interaction between two things here. There's social value and there's procurement, and those two things coming together can make life feel quite rigid at times. So get in early if you can, and when you kind of get the exam question, figure out the smart way of answering the exam question, I think is the short answer.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's quite a few quite a few questions about numbers and metrics versus outcomes, and how you differentiate between the two. Could we take that as the last question before I'll throw one at you in a minute? But I think that's and maybe that is with the other question that I haven't addressed in the Q&A, and I apologize for that, is the blind spots. What is the blind spot we were asked on social value and social impact? Can I ask you, Isabelle, would you be able to pick up on the blind spot question?
See what it is. Hold on a second. What's the blind spot question?
The blind spot question was...
what do you think are the main blind spots when looking at impact?
I'm trying to scan a...
No, I can see it on the screen now. So the main blind spots I would say are possibly focusing so much on what you're trying to achieve in the exam question, which I'm going to use Nathan's analogy, focusing so much on what you're trying to achieve with that you forget the purpose of what you're doing. So because procurement can take over, it can almost squeeze the joy out of the actual goodwill and the good intentions behind projects. And I think that gets lost. And I often see the conflict between the staff department, or often the single person working in social value within an organization, and what they're trying to achieve in terms of social value versus what they have to tick off, what they have to answer in order to win a bid. And there can sometimes be such a conflict. What I would say is one of the big issues that I see is this disparity between leadership and the social value department, and the idea that social value does not thread throughout an organization. So I wouldn't call it a single blind spot, but what I would really describe this as is that I want to see social value embedded in every decision. So rather than being seen as something that we add on or we have to achieve, it's something that is impacting throughout an organization. And if that were to be the case, if we were to live in that ideal world, then there wouldn't be so many blind spots. And I think what we can often do is to lose the purpose, lose the intention, because we're trying to fulfill and follow a process. So that's my very broad answer to
Oh, that's
cover
brilliant.
a number of ills.
And a very optimistic way. I mean, let's turn it around the other way. If the rest of the panelists had a magic wand, therefore, and in the context of social value and social impact methodologies, what would you hope you'd like to change with that magic wand by? I know everybody does that, but a 2030, say 5 years time, what would you hope to have changed in this field by then? So nasty one to finish with, but I'm conscious of time, so I'd love your perspectives on what is that hope that we can change.
I think there's something about working towards getting everybody with a really happy, comfortable confidence level with social value. I find that it can become intimidating, and it can become a feeling of a bit of a burden. And this is supposed to be the nice bit. This is supposed to be the good, fun bit, the giving back. You know, the choosing things, the making people feel better about coming into work or being on Teams all day. So I think if we can do little things to make incremental change in businesses universally, where people just start to feel like I've got this when it comes to social value, everything would just feel a little bit nicer and a little bit easier.
Brilliant, thank you. Holly, can I come to you?
Yeah, I think for me, and also touch on Isabelle's point and kind of that purpose as well, is actually, I think as a sector, we've became really focused on methods and methodologies, and that's why this talk has been put on as well. But actually, as an in-person working within the business, is actually how we're delivering social value, which I think VCSEs are really good at, but actually how a business is operating to do that as well. So I know we're posting the value of the social impact that we're having, or we're posting the KPIs that we're reaching, but actually, how are we delivering that on a ground level? How are you getting your delivery teams to do that? How are you finding the time within your business to allow people to do that? I think that's quite a lot of smoke and mirrors at the moment, maybe because of procurement, maybe because how people are putting it in bids. But I think that would be really useful for people and important.
That moving from methodology to delivery, that's fantastic. And Nathan.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad about this because I'm not sure this is kind of a nice thing, or I don't know. Actually, it might appeal to Carrie-Ann's inner social value geek, and it's kind of it's to the blind spot earlier on. For me, it's data. It's the collection of actual social value data, and as I said before, you know, that's the stories as well as the numbers and the, if you like, the evidence. But being able to collect that consistently, we do spend a hell of a lot of time talking about methodologies and approaches, and whether, you know, impact is better than value, or you know, whether one covers the other. But actually, we don't spend enough time collectively making sure that we have good quality data and we really understand what's going on, and we can talk about it. Because if we don't have good data, we can't shout about what we do, we're very conscious of you know, organizations we work with who want to talk to their CFO or to other stakeholders or outside of the organization about the great things they do, but they're held back by the quality of the data that they're faced with. So I think, you know, getting some basics right, and that for my magic wand for 2030, it would be to have a universal data standard, if you like, for social value that is applied across the board and people stick to and buy into.
And I like that concept of a standard as opposed to a methodology. So there's a standard to the data and evidence rather than a methodology.
Exactly.
I was thinking about that from a magic wand from my perspective, and I think that there's a question on this, or comment on the Q&As about here, in terms of how do we help social value teams help leaders understand the importance of embedding social value in all decisions. I think we've heard from the group that it's not kind of two doors down on the left, that it's everybody's problem, and how you embed social value. My magic wand aim would be really to move social value from a reporting tool to a management tool, to really use social value and the way we measure social value to inform evidence-led decisions across organizations, in communities, to really ensure that we focus on the change that's needed in society, rather than cleverer ways of measuring it. But I think if we can, that's where it gets, from my inner geek, that's where it gets really exciting, is really understanding and getting underneath, how do we create value? How can we use that to then make decisions? And from my experience, that's certainly how you help leaders embed it. I wonder, to close this off, recognizing what was said at the beginning, Isabelle, as your last panel, and I apologize to coming to you, but as your last panel as CEO of Institute of Social Value, I wonder if you could finish our panel and just reflect on what we've discussed in this session, but also your perspectives on social value going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for giving me these last couple of minutes. So in terms of what I would say about what would I like to see in 2030, and when I heard this question, I thought, my goodness, that's so many years away. We've got decades. And then I realized, oh my goodness, it's only 5 years' time. Time really flies.
Yes.
So what I would love to see by 2030, possibly because of my background as a politician and as a lawyer, I would love social value to be something that everybody understands. I'm a real advocate at heart, and I've always wanted social value to be something easily understood. And my test has always been, when I speak, could a 14-year-old teenager understand what I'm saying, be engaged with it, be interested? Most importantly, understand how it's relevant to them. So that's my number one of three. The second thing that I would love to see is actually the vision that I came up with for the Institute after many, many weeks of trying to figure out what should our vision be, and trying to figure out, what should the future be for the Institute as well as the sector. And it's very simple. It's knowing that social value is at the heart of every decision, put plain and simply. And the reason that I included the word heart is because I felt, coming into this sector, there was a lot of structure and a lot of, putting things in boxes, which is the pathway that things had gone into. And so I just wanted to bring the word heart into our vision, because I didn't want to lose sight of that, because that's what's happening on the ground when we're creating social value, and it's what we do day to day, but it's not what's necessarily reported on. And the last thing, I guess, is something that the Institute has been thinking about for some time, and I don't know if it's something that my successor will take forward, but it's stepping into this fray of methodologies and organizations not knowing one from another and what to do, because in many ways we've sort of given principles and ideas of how organizations can go forward, but not necessarily given an answer, and maybe there isn't one. But what I would love to see in terms of the Institute and methodology is finding some way of assessing each approach against the 8 principles of social value, so that there is some way for organizations to make informed decisions without feeling like there's no framework, there's no approach that they can understand what they're comparing one to another. And that is a very complex task. It will be something that will take some time to embed, but I hope that that is something that I can see, because I'm very, I would love, just as an individual, to have some clarity in order to be able to make decisions. And so I think that would be a great gift to give to the sector. So
Brilliant.
Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And just lastly, before we close the panel, thank you very much to all the panelists for their experience. And I know we've jumped around lots of different questions, and so thank you to the panel for sharing your experience and extensive experience. And also thank you to the 240 odd people in the session. Brilliant questions, lots of likes and thumbs up coming and hearts coming through the session. So thank you. I hope we've begun the discussion that continues on through this conference. So thank you, everybody. I might be